Welcome to Consider This with Big Joe Clark. Joe is a certified financial planner and adjunct assistant professor at Purdue University. Consider This is brought to you by the Financial Enhancement Group, LLC, where Joe serves as managing partner. The Financial Enhancement Group is an SEC-registered investment advisory firm based in Anderson, with offices in Anderson, Lafayette, Indianapolis, and Rensselaer, Indiana. This show is for educational purposes, and you're strongly encouraged to consult with your financial professionals for personalized guidance. Big Joe can be reached at 800-928-4001. You can find out more information about Joe and the Financial Enhancement Group at yourlifeafterwork.com. Enjoy the show, and remember to consider this.
Hello and welcome to Consider This. Joe Clark, Sherry Contos, and others. You are listening to the best of Consider This put together over the last few years of this show. You can find the information from the show on our website at yourlifeafterwork.com, iTunes, and various other places. Obviously, we're here weekly on WILO from 4 to 5 p.m. During drive time, Saturday morning on our flagship station of WQME from 9 to 10 a.m., and Sunday mornings on Shine 99 between 10 and 11 a.m. Consider This really is a show that's much more than just the weekly headlines. We work together to try to give you insights and directions into things that you may want to consider about your financial lives. And the questions come in many directions. You can always reach us on Twitter, hashtag AskBigJoe. And of course, you can email us your questions. Consider This, that's all one word, consider this at yourlifeafterwork.com. We break the show down into what we call 5 critical financial elements. One, always begin with the end in mind, so we start with retirement income. Where is the money going to come from to maintain your standard of living? Number 2, then, is the tax plan that needs to be done each and every year before the end of the year. 3 is the investment policy statement. What's going to keep you from getting caught in a downturned market without paying attention, without having discipline to how you want to respond? 4th is life happens. It's the good and the bad and ugly of life, the things that we just normally see that take place. Last but not least is the legacy plan. Everything that we do is all about your life after work. That's the name of our website, yourlifeafterwork.com. We want to take what's going on in the world, keep you abreast of changes that matter. Sure, it's always fun to talk about markets and headlines, but what we really want to do is give you things to consider. So as I said, shoot us an email, consider this at yourlifeafterwork.com. Enjoy the show and keep in touch. We'll be right back. Consider This with Big Joe Clark is brought to you by the Financial Enhancement Group, a Hoosier-based registered investment advisory with more than $150 million under management. The Financial Enhancement Group serves clients in 25 states and proudly takes care of people who don't want to worry about their own money. You can find out more about the Financial Enhancement Group at yourlifeafterwork.com or reach any one of our 4 Central Indiana offices at 1-800-928-4001. Your Life After Work. That's what it's all about. Good morning and welcome back to Consider This. I'm Joe Clark.
I'm Sherry Contos.
Happy to have you folks along. Happy 4th of July. Hope you are enjoying the wonderful day. Family, friends, hot dogs, parades.
All that stuff.
You know, we grew up in going to Chesterfield's parade every,
Really?
and used to, Mom came from a big family. And we would have 40 or 50 people at our 4th of July parties every year, kids everywhere.
Wow.
It was,
Yeah.
and I miss those days.
Yes.
A lot of them are gone,
Mm-hmm.
and that I really miss my aunts and uncles and having my folks and my brother and all the kids around. It was a cool time.
I remember the sparklers. That's what I remember when I was a kid. My grandparents bought. My parents didn't really like that kind of thing, but my grandparents were all about it.
They were all about it.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Sparklers out the wazoo.
You gotta like that. And I would be remiss not to say happy birthday to my wife. If you're happening to listen Sunday morning, it is hers. Say a prayer for her. She living with me is not probably the easiest thing in the world to do. So happy birthday, honey, and love you very, very much. All right, Sherry, where are we at?
Okay. Questions. Someone wrote in about wedding planning. Now, I'm going to say that they're probably not asking about wedding planning as in where to buy the dress, how to pick out the flowers, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to guess that what they meant was wedding planning in terms of finances. So what should they be considering about setting aside the money for a wedding. And again, I'm not sure if this was the actual person paying for the wedding themselves or the parents paying for the wedding for the daughter.
Parents don't really pay for the wedding. That's just that's a fib.
Really?
Kaylee, are you hearing? Are you listening?
It never happens.
It never happens. Okay, so there's things to consider. Obviously, when you start out, so let's go with the toughest question first. Do you or don't you want a prenuptial? And pre obviously means before. Nuptial means wedding,
Sure.
Joining. And so a prenuptial agreement is a thing that you would have that essentially says this is how money would be treated in the event that this didn't work out.
Right. This is like a hugely emotional issue.
It's a very, very, very touchy thing. So to understand where I'm coming from, I'm a big believer in marriage,
Yes.
and if done correctly, somebody dies.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you kill them.
Right.
It just means God calls them. God calls them home, and
Nice. Yep.
that's if done correctly. That is the way that it's done. So, and I've even provided, even was the host, I guess you will, if you want to, of the ceremony, the pastor that married a couple, a friend of ours, friends. And very, very honored to be able to have done that. So I take this stuff very, very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that said, when somebody comes in and it's their second or third marriage, then we're going to bring up the conversation of whether or not it's a prenuptial agreement. I've never figured out the correct moment to ask.
Yeah. Are they coming in together? Are they coming in themselves?
Well, when usually it's the parents of the children,
Okay.
or the client says, hey, Joe, I've met somebody thinking about getting married. And, that's when we have that conversation. I'm not sure when you bring it up. In the times that we've had prenuptials that have been done, I will tell you in every single case, it was the one who you wouldn't think would be asking the question that actually brought it up. Because they didn't, you want to make sure that they didn't think that they were marrying somebody for their money, or their resources. So it was kind of an interesting situation. But a prenuptial agreement can control everything that you have in terms of whether or not it's a marital asset. The one thing that it cannot do is direct where your 401k or 403b benefits go to in the event of your demise. Prenuptial agreements, it doesn't matter what they say. The beneficiary designation on a 401k plan has to be your spouse unless they have waived that right after the marriage. In other words, a post-nuptial. So prenuptial agreements do not help with 401ks. The Department of Labor decided that in a federal court hearing.
Well, yeah, but if you're divorced, they would no longer be your spouse.
If you were divorced, that's the case. But
right.
So let's say I have a prenuptial agreement. You and I are getting married. We've got a prenuptial agreement that says my 401k goes to Kaylee and Kendra.
Oh.
And I die, you actually still get it, Shay. And Barb will be very unhappy that you got it, but
well, I think so.
I'm probably more unhappy than I died, but no, just kidding, honey. All right, so that's the prenuptial part. That's one of the things that you have to consider. The rest of the stuff is really where do you save and accumulate money to help pay for it. And if you listen to the show for a while, you know that I like the idea, the concept of Roth IRAs. For retirement and for a lot of other things. Roth simply means you get no deduction when you put the money in, but the money that comes out in the growth is all tax-free if used for something that the IRS deems worthy, if you will. So, for housing, for instance. But anytime after 59 and a half, there's no penalty on the growth. There's no tax on the growth. You've already paid taxes on the money that you've put in, which is what we call the contribution.
Right.
So one of the neat things about a Roth and wedding planning is you can actually contribute to somebody's Roth for them if they have earned income and qualify. And then if they want to use part of that money for the wedding, they can pull the contribution part out of the Roth to be able to help pay for it. And it goes right along with the psychology I give people. Always use cash when you can. I watch when I just watch how people behave, and plastic is so cheap, especially when it's somebody else's plastic. It's easy to sign for a bill and throw down a plastic. It's a lot harder to put down a Benjamin Franklin and do it. Right. And the same thing is true here when, I watch parents overspend for weddings. And when we have the money that is sitting inside of their own account and they have to pull it out to spend $2,000 for a dress or, something, then that's a decision that they have to make. So that's a really good way to do it. one of the conversations you need to have, especially if you're getting married as an older person, or you've been on your own for a long time, is how accounts are going to be titled. And just make sure that you agree. Obviously, if you're an individual, you've had individual accounts of some nature. If you get married, are we going to make those joint accounts? Are we going to keep our accounts separate? How are we going to do it? I have a few families where I'm the financial planner for one of them, and the other one's got their guy. And it's kind of interesting how that plays out sometimes, but it is what it is. It works out pretty well. So those are the quick things to consider. I obviously try not to go into debt to get married. If you can't pay cash for it at a wedding, you'll do your life more harm financing some of that than you would just to have a smaller staple wedding.
And I always tell, I've been through this with my daughter and my son.
Sure.
It's just a day. You ought to spend more time preparing for the marriage than the wedding.
Yeah.
And in terms of money, it is just a day. And so, for instance, in one case with my son, we set aside some money for the wedding. Well, they decided, or for the honeymoon, they decided, well, we'd rather buy a house. We'd rather do this. It's so interesting what you just said. When you put the money aside for the child themselves, and it's their choice to pull it out and buy the $2,000 wedding dress or spend $2,000 in Hawaii. It's interesting the kind of decision that
absolutely
results,
right.
So anyway,
it is. And one final trick on that, and I got to see this in a wedding I was part of years and years ago. I thought it was very, very cool. There are aunts and uncles that have no kids.
Yes.
And so their nieces and nephews become their heirs, right?
Yeah.
And so in this particular instance, the aunt and uncle have a reasonable size sum of money that is going to go to their niece when they pass away.
Right.
And so they said, hey, here's the deal. We want to give you guys $1,500 for, and this was a long time ago, we want to give you guys $1,500 for your honeymoon. To be able to go. And they were so blessed with that gift again, but they had been good savers. And so, the aunt and uncle asked, where are you going? And they told them, and they said, well, how much did it cost? And they told them, and then they gave him the rest of the money. They didn't want them to go spend $5,000 on a honeymoon, and say, here's $5,000 and, go spend all of this. They didn't want to be wasteful, but if they were going to spend their own money, then the aunt and uncle were in for it. And so it was an interesting dynamic. That way you value things at different levels.
Yeah. Okay. Next question.
Firecrackers.
Yeah, firecrackers. Buy or lease a car, and I've done both.
Me too.
So and I've been burned on one. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
I don't know how you get burnt on a lease because you know exactly what it is going in, what it is going out.
Well, you get burnt when you underestimate how many miles you're going to drive.
Well, there's that part. That's that you did the burning in that case. That wasn't.
I did not know I lived in my car. But.
So the interesting thing right now about buying and leasing is the currency exchange rate.
Okay.
And which has nothing to do with the car, obviously. But when you finance, if it's leased, it may be coming out of a different country, thus with a different interest rate environment. When you buy, it tends to be financed here, where you're dealing with a very strong dollar and low interest rate. So in my daughter's case, when she went to get her first car, we were able to actually we were able to lease it, and the buyout at the lease is less than what she would have still owed on the car if she'd been making payments over 5 years. Wow. And that's all because of where the currency exchange rates were. So I think you do have to look at your situation. Obviously, the big catch on the lease, as Sherry just said, is when you turn it back in, you have to have an assumption over the 3 years how many miles you're going to drive.
Yep.
And you can buy extra miles for cheaper up front, but if you don't use them, you lose them.
Right.
And that was when, in all fairness, we sold our GM stock. I had a Suburban that was on lease. And it was 18 months into a 3-year lease, and I'd already hit the mileage. And GM called, and the dealer called and said, Joe, we've got a brand new Suburban in here if you want to bring in the old one. We'll switch you out. No cost, no change in payment, no nothing. And I said, but I'm already over my mileage. And they go, the sales guy said, Joe, they don't even take that into consideration. And it's kind of like, you got to be kidding.
Yeah.
So I drove as quickly as I could to the dealership, switched the keys, and away I went.
You were good.
So I think you just have to do the math. One of the things, if you're younger, one of the happiest days in your life is when you have no car payment. When you have a lease, you can't have no payment.
Right.
It just continues to come. So
Right.
we don't have any that are leased anymore. But it is a choice, but you do have to pay attention to the economics. If you've never leased before, you tend to put down a down payment. Part of the payment that you pay are considered sales taxes along the way. That's always interesting to me. Even if you get out of the lease early, for one way or another, you still have to pay the taxes. I don't get all that, but that's the way that they're structured. But what happens is at the end of the time period, you already have a known price that you can buy the car for. And so that's how if somebody is going to finance one, that's really how we sit down and look at it and go, okay, what are the terms? What would the payments be if you financed? What are the payments if you lease it? What's the buyout?
Yeah.
And then just do the math. And then, like I said, in my daughter's case, even though we know she's keeping the car, the lease was better for the first 3 years than it was for her to do the original payout. So it's a good question. It's one of those that a lot of people don't ask. They just go to the dealership and figure the dealer will help them. Remember, one of the ways that the dealership gets paid is on the financing. They're selling that note or that loan, and so that doesn't make them bad people, but you want to make sure that you're getting the right answers for you. And again, that's one more reason why I think fiduciary should exist in people's life. I have to treat your money as if it were mine and we were in the same situation, and that's how I'm legally bound, and I kind of like it that way. So anyhow, you're listening to Consider This. Joe Clark, Sherry Contos. Hope you're having an outstanding day. You got any comments or questions, shoot us an email. considerthis@yourlifeafterwork.com. We'll take a break and be right back.
Are you overwhelmed with financial complexity? Are you confused about how your 401k and your IRAs work together? If so, you're not alone. At the Financial Enhancement Group, we work to make your financial life simple. On a single sheet of paper we call the Family Focus page, we help you lay out your long-term financial objective with the next 36-month key financial objectives. At the Financial Enhancement Group, we keep it simple. We keep you on track. We work together. 800-928-4001. We look forward to hearing from you.
Good morning and welcome back to Consider This. I'm Joe Clark.
I'm Sherry Contos.
Happy to have you along. Happy 4th of July. It's our fireworks message.
I know.
And yeah, there you go. We're trying to cover a lot of things very quickly, and some things just aren't that simple. They take a little more time than what I would like.
I know. I have to have an elevator speech for every
We do,
topic.
and I don't.
All right, well, I know.
Fire away.
Here we go. Education costs. Now, we're not just talking about tuition here. We're talking about all the things that go with it when you go to college and the carry cost of those items.
So carry cost is something that people miss a lot. And the best example that I give to people is when you buy a house, you know what it cost.
Right.
You know to a degree what the property taxes are, though those can fluctuate. You know what the insurance is, though that can fluctuate. What you don't know is when the heater's going to go out, the water softener needs replaced, the normal upkeep on the paint. You don't know what a landscaper is going to cost, right? Those are carry costs. They're things that get added in. And when you go to college, Kendra's running off to IUPUI, right? There is a known cost for tuition.
Sure.
There is an estimated cost for books and for lab stuff that she's going to need. But there's a bunch of additional costs that are there. And, people will ask me the question, how much does it really cost to go to college? Well, if Kendra was at home, she'd be eating food there. Right. The utility bill won't change at home, and yet we'll have a new rent bill down yonder.
Sure.
So there are just additional things that are there, and you want to be able to budget for the carry cost the best that you can, but you really want to understand them and be aware of them. And we can take this back to my life of investing, if you will. One of the challenges that I have with mutual funds is that people do not understand the carry cost. Oftentimes, I will say you know the fee, but you don't know the expense. Mm-hmm. And people look at me, well, fees and expenses are the same. And I'll even see mutual funds that say the the expense is this, or the fees are this, and it's no, that's the known cost. That's like the payment on the house or the paying the tuition.
Right.
If you read the prospectus, there's additional expenses that exist every year that are unknown going into the year. They're trading cost. And if you don't know how many trades you're going to make, you don't know what that cost is, so you can't publish it. So, John Bogle, for instance, that built Vanguard, estimates that in many mutual funds, the expense ratio is twice a year of what the known fee is. So if they say they're charging 0.8% or 1.1%, you can often see another 2% internal charge, that's a drag, that hurts your investments. And it's why I tell people, if you've got more than $50,000, you really don't need to be in mutual funds. You've got enough money to be able to be in exchange traded funds, get those fees and expenses where you can control them. But this is about college, so we'll go back to that.
Yeah.
So pay attention to the carry costs that are going in, and it's just be honest with your children. It's like, listen, there are going to be things that pop up. We've budgeted money for this, and we're going to set aside another certain amount every month. And that's all we've got. And we'll have to deal with the surprises that come along together.
Right.
You wanting pizza at 10 o'clock on a Friday night is not a surprise.
Right.
Car breaking down, on the way to a lab, okay, that's a surprise. And that's something that we have to help and deal with.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Moving on along.
Moving on. Okay, this is a big one. And I anyway, across your life, you're going to face this question more than once. Buying a house, renting a house.
I think we actually wrote an article about this not too many weeks ago. So if you want to read it, you can go to our website at yourlifeafterwork.com, where it says our insights. If you click on that, it'll have the radio show. You can get signed up for the Market Carver if you'd like it. It's our weekly. Here's what's going on in the market that we deal with and pay attention to. It's purely investment related. But you can find the column on there. So buying versus renting. Again, it goes back to the same carry cost conversation that we just had with the college part. It's knowing what all of those expenses are and what happens. I'm 48 years old, and the majority of people in our life, when Barb and I were younger, you said you need to buy a house as quickly as you can buy one, and by golly, we did. We moved into our first home during the ice storm back in '91. And that's, we had a trailer, and then we bought the house and we moved over a good old Ridgewood Drive. And I had no idea what it would cost to actually turn on electricity, get some of the stuff taken care of inside of the house that need to be done. Those are carry cost type issues. And so my rule that I tell people today is you're going to have a lot of well-intentioned people in your life. There was nobody out there that was trying to harm Barbara or myself by telling us to buy a home, and it worked out okay.
Sure.
Nobody was trying to hurt us at all, but you are going to have well-intentioned people in your life that tend to look at it through their lens, their perspective, as opposed to yours. Our job as fiduciaries is to legally treat your money as if it were our money and we were in your situation. So I don't look at it as Joe as a 48-year-old business owner. I look at it as, you as a 28-year-old or whatever. And then you're naturally going to have predispositions, biases, if you will, about whether ownership is good or bad. But my standard rule is if you don't believe you're going to live in that place for at least 7 years, it generally does not make sense to buy it.
Is that because of the cost of buying?
A big cost of buying.
Yeah.
An unknown cost, which can be huge, is the ability to liquidate or sell.
Yeah.
Right. You can control when you buy. You cannot control when somebody else does.
That's true.
And so when we looked at some of the problems that just came out of the last economic crunch, right, there were tons of engineering jobs available in Detroit. And that were desperately needed. And the engineers were in Arkansas and couldn't sell their homes. And so our unemployment rate stayed higher than it would have been had home ownership not been so prevalent. If you told me I had to leave my house I sent a letter. I said, listen, guys, this is an easy deal. My tax dollars, your tax dollars, we own all these houses because they're going into foreclosure and we're bailing out the banks.
Right.
So what is the big deal with us switching a house in Arkansas for one in Detroit that we already have both under the system anyhow that are both in foreclosure.
Yeah.
You say they're both worth $150,000. Why not let them swap? We get an engineer employed with an $80,000 a year job. I mean, this is simple. And the very short response I got is that's too many one-offs. We need a big fix.
Ooh.
And it's kind of like, I don't think it was a one-off for the family in Arkansas that could have had the job.
No,
right?
no.
So anyhow, generally speaking, if you're not going to live there for 7 years, in my opinion, with normal appreciation of property, the cost of selling, the cost of buying, the unknown ability to sell, and the carry cost along the way,
right.
I think it makes more sense to rent than it does to own.
Yeah.
Now, there's exceptions to every rule.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
But,
and I do think how you want to live is a big part of that equation. If you can't find a place to rent that you actually feel good about living in. For instance, I'm using myself as an example. When I was trying to locate a place to live a couple of years ago, few options. There was not going to be a place to rent that I would have felt safe renting at that point. Now, I happened to buy at a great time. On my schedule, good time. The guy I bought from got killed.
wow.
So I mean, it's you're right though. You don't ever know. You don't know.
And so that's just part of the deal.
Right. Exactly.
Like I said, you can read the article if you want to know more on our website at yourlifeafterwork.com. You can just read the article or other articles I've written. I write weekly for the Anderson Herald Bulletin, have for, I don't know, probably 15 years now. And it's one of those things that shows up Saturday morning in your newspaper.
Yep.
All right.
Bulletin.
Next question.
Okay. We might want to say this, but I'll bring it up anyway. What is a healthy debt to income ratio?
What do you mean you don't want to say it?
No, I said we may not have time to cover this.
Oh, well, yeah, that's true. Let's work on it. A ratio, the best way to understand that is to think about a dashboard in your car, right? So you're driving down the road and you're looking at your dashboard and you know the things that are there. The fuel's there, the speedometer's there that's telling you how far you're going, the mileage to tell you how many miles your car has been, the oh my gosh, you're out of oil light. Oil pressure comes on. There's a lot of different gauges. If you're got one of the fast cars, you may have an RPM thing in there as well. A lot of different gauges, and at different points in the trip, different gauges matter more. Right? Different things matter more. Well, there are a lot of different financial ratios, and ratios are just a comparison, usually between two things. And there's a lot of financial ratios that we can look at, your savings ratio, your liquidity ratio, your debt to income ratio, a lot of different things we can look at it. And at different stages, some are more important than others. Debt to income ratio is we tend to talk about it monthly, and your debt is your monthly obligation that has to be paid. So a car payment is an obligation.
Sure.
Student debt is an obligation.
House payment.
A house payment is an obligation. Minimum monthly payment on the credit card is an obligation, not the balance. The minimum monthly payment, right? Now, I always tell people, try getting out of a cell phone contract. How is that not a contract? But it is not figured in the debt to income ratio. So your utility bills are not figured in. Cable's not figured in, right? If you have child support, it is, right? Those are the things that are factored into that ratio.
Okay.
So when you go to buy a house, since we'll keep these together, the banker is going to check your credit score, but they're also going to look at your monthly debt obligations to your income that comes into the household. And they're going to want that number to certainly be below 40%. Some people say, what's the sweet spot? The sweet spot is a very low number. But for getting a house, counting the payment, the taxes, the insurance, they're going to want, including all of your other stuff, your debt to income ratio to be somewhere between 36 and 38%. In order to be able to make it as a viable loan and be able to conventionally package it and be able to sell it off. And that's the number they're going to look at.
Okay.
So one of the things for younger folks that we talk about is try not to go buy an expensive car and buy a house. If you're going to buy a house, then you want to buy a junker, because the car payment, think about it. I mean, I've had car payments that were as much as my house payment.
Exactly.
And you can get a car after you get a house It's many times because the debt to income ratio is entirely different that the loans they're looking at on a car. So I'll have, when my kids would graduate from Purdue, I used to teach there. I retired this last semester, but they would say, "Hey, I'm going to go I'm getting a car, and then I'm going to get an apartment in Chicago, and then I'm going to find a house up there to live in." I go, whoa. Let's not go buy the car yet. Go find the place that you want to live in. If you know you're going to be there 7 years or longer, go find the place that you're going to live in, and then go get the car.
Right.
You just need to do it in that right order. But pay attention to the debt to income ratio, and understand it's a lot. Ratios and dashboards are a lot alike. Depending where you are on the trip. If the gas is in a half tank, it doesn't matter. If the gas is on empty, it may matter more than your speed.
Sure.
If there's a police officer in the back window, the speed probably matters more than the oil. If the oil light comes on, get that puppy changed, right?
Yeah.
I wish there was something I could do for people so that their oil check engine light would come on for the retirement. So that, because, people drive without the check engine light on. They assume everything's okay. And the bad news is you only get one shot at retirement, my friends. Hope you're having an outstanding 4th of July weekend. You got a question or comment, shoot us an email. Consider this at yourlifeafterwork.com. I got to take a break. We'll be right back.
Consider This with Big Joe Clark is brought to you by the Financial Enhancement Group, a Hoosier-based registered investment advisory with more than $150 million under management. The Financial Enhancement Group serves clients in 25 states and proudly takes care of people who don't want to worry about their own money. You can find out more about the Financial Enhancement Group at yourlifeafterwork.com or reach any one of our 4 Central Indiana offices at 1-800-928-4001. Your Life After Work. That's what it's all about.
Well, good morning and welcome back to Consider This, or as Sherry said, good day, we should say.
I think that works for everybody.
It's
good
the
day.
Afternoon, could be the morning, regardless.
Yes.
Hopefully we're giving you financial insights that will work for you regardless of
That
when you're
would
listening.
make it a good day.
That would make it. Ooh,
See, there you go.
I like it,
There
Sherry.
you go.
I like it. Hey, I'm Joe Clark.
Sherry Contos.
Happy to have you along. A week or so ago on the show, I mentioned a book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, and I'm blessed to be able to read and to be able to be around, I guess, some of the greater authors and people who give great speeches. I think Malcolm does a great job talking. He kind of looks a little bit like Einstein.
Really?
He wrote a book called Tipping Point. Wrote another book called Blink, What the Dog Saw. And my favorite by far is Outliers, and it's a really good book.
One word, 2 words, outliers.
One word.
Like it's a description of people?
No. So statistically,
okay.
when you hear people talk about standard deviation and all of those things,
yeah.
something that is more than 3 deviations away, 3 standards away, is considered an outlier, or some people would call it a fat tail.
Okay.
But what he's looking for in that book are things that are just easy for me to say, abnormal events that are outside of what you would expect in a normal period, or in a normal study, or sample. So one of the things, for instance, is the people who play in the NHL, the National Hockey League.
Okay.
It's like over 70% of them are born in one of 3 months.
Really?
And
all in Canada, right?
No, but a lot of.
Yeah.
But when you look at that, I mean, that is clearly an outlier. So what caused it?
Yeah.
And so anyhow, one of the things that he talked about is that in order to be good at your craft, you have to do 10,000 hours. And we've got these really smart people at AU, Anderson University. And so one of them decided to do a little bit of studying. Turns out there is a very interesting infographic that talks about how long it takes to become very good at something. And I love infographics. If you've not seen one, they're a picture that tells a story. And they usually have a little bit of text, but they're laid out nicely. If you would like this one, email me, consider this at yourlifeafterwork.com. We're happy to share the email with you, or the infographic with you. I may or may not get it put up on the website. Can't promise. That's not my end of the deal. But we do have the infographic, and it's cool. So here's what we found out, Sherry.
Okay.
It takes 320 hours.
Yes.
To be a celebrity gossip column writer person.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 320 hours.
Does that shock you? It does not shock me at all.
It shocks
Well,
me.
it shocks me that it takes that long.
And actually, I think it's wrong. It takes longer than that to be able to write and to be a columnist. To know about celebrity gossip would take me about 3 minutes because I just don't care.
Yeah, I'm in the same.
That would be gone. That would be gone quickly. But what was interesting is to be an expert. According to Gladwell, in playing piano or darts or golf, it takes 10,000 hours. What Logan was able to find on the infographic was to be an expert in economics.
Yes, let's talk about that.
It was a little over 23,000
because
hours.
everyone knows people who study economics are just naturally smarter and have to, there's more to it, and we really can apply it to more things.
It's because you have a degree
people,
in economics.
I know.
That's where it's coming from.
Well, okay, go ahead. Oh, dear.
Oh. So it's nice to see that they recognize economics takes 23,000 hours.
Yes.
But here's where I would challenge that.
Of course. What?
Well, of course I would.
Yeah.
I started in this industry 2 weeks before the crash in '87.
Uh-huh.
And, a lot of you
Perfect timing.
It was great. I had no clients. I had no money. It was beautiful.
It was beautiful,
right?
Yeah.
I got to see how other people behaved. But my point being is from 1987 to now, I've got a lot more than the 23,000 hours put in.
Yes.
But to think that the world was the same in 1987 as it is today is not true, right? So when you think about John Wooden and the foundation of basketball, right? Mm-hmm. Wooden taught us some things. He would spend, allegedly, I obviously wasn't there, but he would spend the first practice on teaching the boys in college how to put on socks.
Really?
And think about that. And that was the old story, because you get a blister, you can't play, right? And so he would teach them the fundamentals from the bottom up. The fundamentals of economics probably don't change, but there are so many forces that do. We live in an entirely different world. So I am very thankful and fortunate that I've been able to be in this industry and have this career. I'm very blessed to be able to teach it at Purdue and to also be a managing partner of a firm. It's been an outstanding life, and I'm just very, very thankful for that part. But for me to tell somebody that it's the same now as it was when I started, it's really not accurate. So let's do a little John Wooden, and let's talk about some fundamentals, shall we?
I think we should.
Okay. So there's this big word that bothers some people because it's not one you would use in a normal vocabulary, but it's called fiduciary.
Yes.
And
we talk about it all the time.
It's because it's important to us. Yeah. And so what fiduciary essentially means, is in as simple English terms as I can put it, is that I have to, as a legal fiduciary, take care of your money as if it were my money and I were in the same situation as you are. Mm-hmm. So when Sherry says, Joe, here's my stuff, right? Here's my tax return. Here's my investment statements. Here's my retirement plan from work. Here's my Social Security information. Here's my estate plan. I have to look at it as a certified financial planner, 27 years of being in the industry, from everything that I know from Purdue, from being an adjunct assistant professor there for the last 7 years. I've got to take all of that, and I've got to act on your behalf exactly like I would if I were in the same situation. And that means that I'm not trying to sell you something under suitability. Right. And that in my mind, that does not mean that people who sell things, mutual funds or that work on commission, it doesn't mean that they're not necessarily acting in your best interest, but there may very well be a conflict.
Right.
Right.
And
so
it'd be hard to see through that,
It really is. So as a fiduciary, right? Yeah. I have to treat your money as if it were mine in the same situation. So what I need you in Radioland to recognize is that we all have a fiduciary. Everybody does.
Yes.
Either it's you, or you've hired somebody that is a licensed legal fiduciary, registered investment advisor, to do that. That's not a stockbroker.
Right.
It's not somebody that works at one of the national firms that's driving down the road. Either you are the fiduciary or you've hired somebody to do that. So when you go to the doctor and the doctor says, what's wrong, Sherry? And you tell him what's going on. The doctor doesn't look at you and go, well, here's 3 prescriptions. Which would you prefer?
Right.
The doctor says, this is the prescription you're taking. That's really the difference. If I was in the business of selling things, you would come to me.
Right.
I would lay out 3 things that I said, these are all pretty good ideas, but at the end of the day, you have to pick. You've got to make the selection. Under a fiduciary, I pick. I'm the one that ends up making the decision. You either decide to hire me or not hire me, but I'm not going to call you and ask you what you think about an earnings report,
right,
or what you think about what's going on economically
because that's what we're
in
paying
Greece.
you for.
That's what you're paying us for, right?
Yeah.
So let's assume for a second that you're your fiduciary.
Okay.
We're going to go back to the John Wooden, the fundamentals. Mm-hmm. There are 4 areas that you have to have a very good grasp of.
Okay.
And what I call them is the fiduciary focus. Mm-hmm. And I love filters. We've talked about Malcolm Gladwell and Outliers. The Checklist Manifesto is another one of my favorite books. But you've got to have this filter system of how you think about things, and you can't let one thing necessarily dominate another. So those 4 areas, the first one is risk and volatility, mm-hmm. and that's the market moving. Where does risk come from? What does it mean? How does it relate to what's going on inside of my retirement or my portfolio?
Now, is it risk as in the reality of risk in your portfolio, or is it risk as in how much I personally can tolerate?
It's both.
Both. Okay.
But remember, when you hear the word risk in our industry, it essentially means getting something different than what you expect.
Ah.
Right. So, go back to FDR. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And history is important.
Sure.
You go back to the fireside chats. Roosevelt needed money back in the banks. Mm-hmm. And whether it was him or one of his speechwriters, I can't tell you. But that was the first time you ever heard the stock market referred to as risky. Ah. Because he knew, as a human, when Sherry hears the word risk,
I'm going to think
she
twice.
Thinks loss of principal.
Right, yeah.
Right? Risk really means getting something different than you expect.
Could be good or bad.
The stock market is speculative.
Right.
Because it can be up or down.
Right.
It's not risky in the way that our minds process risk. It's speculative, right?
Right.
But understanding that risk and volatility, knowing where you are in your life, whether it's retirement time, whether you're young, how soon it is till you need to be able to access some of that money, being able to acknowledge that and put together the right plan, that's the first thing. And sadly, it's what a lot of people get fixed on. They spend their whole lives mesmerized by the risk and the volatility. They either are totally immune to it and have it all in equities, or they're scared to death of it and have it all in cash,
right,
and hide it in a mattress if they could. The second one are fees and expenses. And as we've talked about on the show before, those are different things. Fees are documented. You know what they are going in. Expenses are the part of doing business along the way. And we're going to spend a little bit of time on that in the next in the next part of the show. But you want to make sure that you're paying an appropriate amount. That doesn't mean free. That doesn't mean, you want to pay an appropriate amount of fees and expenses to be able to get the job done that you want done. The third one is the taxes, but both today and tomorrow. If you're used to going to our website at yourlifeafterwork.com, you can go to last week's show, and I spent time teaching you how to read your return. We broke down the return, the things that you needed to know to really be aware of, and what was going on. Last but not least is making sure that you get a real return. Now, real is when you add inflation to it. So if it costs 2% more to buy stuff this year than it did last year, then a real return is something that's positive plus 2%, right? That's what real means. And it's important to pay attention to it. It's one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make in retirement planning, Sherry, is they look at their income and they say, well, I need $4,000 a month.
They just look at the dollar, yeah.
I need $4,000 a month. They don't understand their life expectancy. If a husband and wife make it to age 60 in reasonable health, mm-hmm. not great, in reasonable health, the actuaries tell us that there's a 90% chance one of them lives to be 90. So that's 30 years, folks, that you've got to be able to have an income stream that continues to grow. And it is important to understand that impact of inflation, what it can really, really do to a portfolio and so forth. So If you got a question or comment, you can shoot us an email. Consider this at yourlifeafterwork.com.
Or tweet us.
Or tweet us.
Yes, at hashtag AskBigJoe.
That's how you get a question directly to me.
Yeah.
If you want to follow us on Twitter, it's big_Joe_Clark. So, I don't get it. And if you want me to send it to you, just like I said, shoot us an email. Consider this at yourlifeafterwork.com. I got to take a break. We will be right back. We're going to talk a little bit about those fees and expenses and a little bit about history.
Ooh.
Take a break. We'll be right back.
Are you overwhelmed with financial complexity? Are you confused about how your 401k and your IRAs work together? If so, you're not alone. At the Financial Enhancement Group, we work to make your financial life simple. On a single sheet of paper we call the Family Focus page, we help you lay out your long-term financial objective with the next 36-month key financial objectives. At the Financial Enhancement Group, we keep it simple. We keep you on track. We work together. 800-928-4001. We look forward to hearing from you.
Well, good morning and welcome back to Consider This. I'm Joe Clark.
I'm Sherry Contos.
And who are you? No. Seriously, let us know. Shoot us an email.
Yeah.
Consider this at yourlifeafterwork.com.
That would be fun, actually, to know who's...
As they say, keep the conversation going. You find it interesting when people tell you that they've heard you.
I really do. And it's like funny because in this particular case, I was coming out of a dressing room. I had a whole pile of bathing suits in my hand. So it wasn't the time I wanted to be caught by people, saying, oh, I heard you on the radio. But anyway, it was fun.
It works out very, very, very well. So yeah. I want to take you back into time because fees and expenses seem to really confuse people. So in the probably 95, 96 era, back in that period of time, before the tech wreck, all of a sudden you started to find these online places where you could go and do stock trades. And at that point in time in my career, if I made a stock trade for you, it was anywhere between $210 and $300 to buy or sell a stock, right? And that could be to buy, and those are our cost, right? Mm-hmm. And that could have been to buy or sell $1,000 worth of stock, or $100,000 worth of stock, or $1 million worth of stock, right? And brokers would have a minimum that they would be able to trade. And then they would charge you a kind of a percentage, if you were going to buy or sell those stocks. And so a lot of people started using mutual funds because inside of the mutual fund, you were with a bunch of other people and it would reduce that cost of the trading, right? So because now we're buying right. or selling a bunch of stock. Well, an interesting thing happened on the way to the grocery. People forget that's why mutual funds gained so much in popularity, was to reduce the fees and expenses. So going back to the late 90s again, all of a sudden you have these companies that come out like E-Trade, that would trade stocks much, much cheaper than what you could at a Merrill Lynch or, at a Raymond James or any of the places. Much, much cheaper. And the word, Wall Street's going to go under. People sold the Wall Street stocks. They're not going to make any money. I'm sitting back giggling because people really didn't understand how Wall Street made its money. In the movie Jerry Maguire, the guy said, "Show me the money." Right? Yep. If you're going to be your own fiduciary, if you're going to manage money, you've really got to know where the profitability comes from. And so, when I buy or sell a stock, I have to do it on an exchange of someplace, either the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ. But Sherry, there is a bid price. That is what they will essentially buy it for. And there is an ask price, and that's what they'll sell it for, right?
Okay.
So you've got a bid price, you've got an ask price. There's a space between the two, and that's called the spread.
Right.
Right? So those of us that have a little bit of gray hair somewhere will remember that stocks used to trade in the eighths. So people would say it was 12 and 7/8, right? Well, each eighth was 12.5 pennies. There's 12.5 cents in 12 and a half cents to make up $1, right?
Right.
So it would be 7 1/8, meaning 12.5 cents. Well, the space, the bid and the ask was always at least an eighth off. right?
Okay.
So Wall Street didn't make their money on the transaction. Wall Street makes its money on the spread. If you're buying and I'm selling, that was at least an eighth each way, right?
Sure, yeah.
So when you look at Wall Street and you realize that in a normal market on one exchange today, we trade more than 1 billion shares, and we're talking about a day, right? Think about 1 billion eighths two ways, because I bought it and somebody else had to sell it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So we're talking about a quarter each time something happened. Now,
Wow.
today we trade in pennies. It's not eighths. And the spread between them may not be 12.5 cents, but the volume, the number of shares that they trade is much, much greater, than what is going on. Wall Street made its money that way. Now, why did I take you back through this history lesson? And the answer is a large conversation that's coming out of the Department of Labor, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the White House. There is this conversation in 401k plans of whether or not the person who is helping you with your 401k needs to be somebody like we are at the Financial Enhancement Group, a legal fiduciary, where I am liable to treat your money as if
Like
it were
my
my
own.
money,
Yep.
not in the same situation, not where there's fees, not where it's just fees and expenses. Well, the hilarious part of this conversation is everybody is focusing on the fees,
Yeah.
not the expenses.
Huh.
Right? They're focusing on what is documented, the money for the TPA, the third party administrator,
yeah.
to file the tax forms. They're focusing on
The bill you get. I mean, you can see that number.
You see,
Yeah.
right? Without understanding the true nature of where the expenses really come from.
Yeah.
People buy mutual funds because they don't understand all of the expenses that exist inside of them. So I'll give you for instance.
Okay.
There is a great mutual fund manager. I mean, he does a phenomenal job at one of the big 401k places. He has a fund that has $118 billion in it because he's done a great job.
Okay.
Right? His fee, Morningstar, tells everybody that he is a very cheap fund, because he only charges 65 basis points. That means 0.65% to manage the money, right? Well, but he's 0.65 on 118 billion. It's hard to even get that out. $1 billion. Lot of money.
Right.
The turnover ratio in the fund is about 45%.
That's a lot, isn't it?
That's a lot. But Morningstar says it's a good job because of
Okay.
the way they track turnover.
Okay.
Right? There are 307 holdings inside of the fund,
Okay.
right? 307. The 10 largest holdings, of which, by the way, Google has Class A shares and Class B shares.
Okay.
2 of the top 10 are both Google,
Okay.
and they account for 26% of the $118 billion.
Wow.
So here's your trivia question, because you got to put all this together. I mean, a lot of my world is connecting Poké dots, right? You got to put all this together, understand why I talked about the mutual fund before, right? So now you've got 118 billion. You go online, it tells you it's got a 45% turnover ratio. What does that mean?
Buying and selling.
That's turnover.
That's turnover. But it doesn't tell you if it's turnover of like mutual stock or individual stock, right?
No, it's what people perceive it to be.
Okay.
And in fact, even if you go to Morningstar and you look at the definition, I think it's amazingly confusing. The definition appears that means that 45% of the 307 holdings are sold on an average annual basis over the last 2 years.
Okay.
That is not what turnover ratio means.
I think it's individuals.
Turnover ratio, the 45% turnover ratio is of the 118 billion.
Right.
So So you get the 307 holdings. The 10 largest are 26% of it.
Right.
Now we're talking about the other 74% being bought and sold throughout the course of the year, which, number one, if it's not in an IRA or 401k, creates a huge amount of tax liability and problems, but it's also how they get paid. Not the manager, but now we went from the fee, that's the 65 basis points.
Right, yeah.
Now it's the expense. So when you're a large mutual fund family that controls trades on the exchange where you're making the bid and ask price, right? That spread is like a huge casino for you. And the more shares that are bought or sold, the more profitable you are. And so if you happen to work at one of these, or if you happen to have your money at one of these companies that is on the exchange, and you know who they are, think about the places in Indianapolis that have the offices, you know.
Yeah.
Then the more activity there is, the more money that place makes. So this argument over whether people are managing should be a fiduciary to be in a 401k is a very, very important part. Fees and expenses are critical, but you can't just focus on the fee, guys. You have to understand how this game is really played. Wall Street didn't go under when stock trades became $7 a trade, because that's not how they got paid. It was tertiary. It was a lot of money, but it was a whole nother part of the deal. When you're looking at the fees inside of a 401k plan, that is entirely different than the expenses. And until I can help you pull the covers back so that you can see what's really going on inside of your retirement accounts to understand how that money is working, then you need a fiduciary, somebody who's there looking out for you to try to keep those fees and expenses controlled. Remember, there are 4 things: the risk and volatility, the fees and expenses, the taxes both today and tomorrow, and last but not least is making sure that you get a real return. It all matters greatly. Hey, you're listening to Consider This with Joe Clark, Sherry Contos. We are happy to have you along. You got a question or comment, shoot us an email, considerthis@yourlifeafterwork.com. We do our best to make retirement simple. I try to keep it simple here, but I want you to be more aware of the things that you just may not know. Got to take a break. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Angie Kinzer, the event coordinator for the Financial Enhancement Group. We believe that education is critical to making wise decisions. Frequently, the Financial Enhancement Group provides educational workshops on particular parts of the financial planning process. Call 1-800-928-4001 or visit our website at yourlifeafterwork.com to find upcoming opportunities to learn more about your money. Thanks for listening to Consider This, and don't forget to call 1-800-928-4001 and ask for Angie.
You've been listening to the best of Consider This with Joe Clark, Sherry Contos, and others. Hope you've had a wonderful time listening to it. If there's something that has piqued your interest, made you think a little bit more about your financial life, then I feel good about what we've done. The idea is to truly bring information forward in a usable fashion that you can both understand and apply to your financial lives. As I have spent 27 years as a certified financial planner, 7 of the last years as an adjunct professor at Purdue where I teach financial planning, I do very much consider this part of my ministry, and it's teaching people how to understand their money. C.S. Lewis said the greatest sin of all is pride. I think if we take that back, one of those common areas of pride comes out of finance and out of money. It's also one of the things that interrupts marriage in a very large way. If I can spend my hour, what I like to call the fastest hour in radio, teaching you or giving you ideas about things that you need to consider financially, that can either help make the marital life a little bit better or help make us better understand our money so that we can be better stewards. Again, as I said, I feel like I've done my job. If you've got a question or comment, if you're a Twitter person, you can always find us at big_Joe_Clark. Is my Twitter handle. The way you can ask us a question on the show is #AskBigJoe. Happy to have your questions there. And of course, you can always shoot us an email, Consider This at yourlifeafterwork.com. If you would like more like this or to read our weekly newspaper column, don't forget you can always go to the website at yourlifeafterwork.com. There's quite a few past radio shows, past newspaper columns there where you can find out more information about your life after work and how we can bring it all together. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to the show. God bless. Have a great week. If there's anything we can do to be of service, please don't hesitate to let us know. Take care, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks for listening to Consider This with Big Joe Clark. Big Joe can be reached at 800-928-4001 or via email at bigjoe@yourlifeafterwork.com. The Financial Enhancement Group is located at 429 East 14th Street, Anderson, Indiana, 46016. Be sure to check out their website for more information at yourlifeafterwork.com. Have a great week, and don't forget to consider this.